And now we go back to our random list. We have 34, it looks like. So let's see what we roll next. It's going to be 8. What is 8? Windbreaker. Okay, this is some kind of action anime that a lot of people talked about in the beginning and a lot of people talked about at the end. And I still have no clue what the show is actually about. So let's find out. Alright, that was a pretty good blend of pretty much what I was expecting and not really what I was expecting at all. I just watched all of Windbreaker. Pretty fun show. Also, I'm recording this on the 4th of July, so you're probably going to hear some fireworks in the background. I tried to find the quietest room in the house, and you can still hear them very clearly. But anyway, this is like almost a throwback anime of sorts. It's a for one, it's a delinquents anime, which you really don't see a lot anymore. Like, it's been a hot decade or so since I've seen a really good delinquents anime. Like, you know, school punks and all that stuff. Lots of fighting, a lot of, like, brawls and such. But this was definitely one of the better showings of this genre for a very long time. And the structure of it is basically almost exactly what you'd expect, but like a little bit more modernized. It's not quite as hyper structured as it would have been if this had come out in like the 90s or something. Although when I was watching this kind of gave me a craving to go back and watch one of those like highly structured delinquent, like shonen battle manga kind of series where it's very much like, okay, you're gonna fight this guy now. Okay, now we're gonna fight this guy. Okay, now we're gonna fight this guy. In sort of an episodic fashion. This one has much more of a continuous story than I was It had more of a continuous story than I was expecting, which made getting into it a lot easier. I guess it had a really nice momentum going for at least the first 9.5 episodes, I would say. One of my big complaints about this series is that there's like it pulls a very risky maneuver of putting like the big arc of the season smack dab in the middle of the season. And so, like, you get the lead-up episodes to it of, like, the introductory stuff being like, okay, we're getting introduced to everyone, and then, bam, big giant arc in the middle, and then there's 3.5 episodes after that of just, like, oh, we're cooling down and revamping for the next arc, and we're gonna end on a giant fucking cliffhanger. Now, the cliffhanger itself is not a bad idea, it's just, or it's not, this isn't technically a fault, it's a lot, for me at least, it's a lot harder for me to keep my hype or interest level at the same, like, at a sustainable level when you really just completely fall backwards after not fall down, when you really pull back on the intensity after that big long arc, and you still have like 3.5 episodes to fill for the remainder of the season. I suppose if the second season was already out, this wouldn't be much of an issue. Which I believe the second season's coming out next year. Not sure when next year, but I'll definitely be checking it out. Because this cast is super fun and likable. Some of them are a bit hit and miss. Like the Nire, the guy who's basically not a fighter, his first couple episodes were really fucking rough. Has a bit of a Zenitsu vibe to him, which is not good. But what I like him better when he's doing his like nerdy info dumpy kind of stuff. where he's just like, oh, I am the guy who knows everything about everybody in this school. I'm going to info dump about this character for a little bit in like a nerdy kind of way. I like him better when he's doing that than when he's being a fucking scaredy cat and trying to get and is constantly screaming about people getting pissed off at other people. That part is annoying. But that part started to die down as the series went on. It didn't go away, but it got less intense. So thankfully that happened. And our main character, Sakura, is an interesting case, and like I like his base personality. The bashfulness can get a little over the top sometimes, but it's not a bad trait to give this character, where he's just like I'm the loner. I've been treated bad my whole life. I just need to be alone, and I'm gonna strive to be the number one. And then people like act nice to him, and then he gets super bashful and embarrassed. It's a cool trait. Sometimes the execution is a little too much, but I think it definitely added a lot of it added a unique facet to this character, almost in a moe kind of way, now that I think about it. But also one of my other kind of gripes with this character is like they really lay it on thick in the opening episode of like how his appearance caused him to be mistreated by other people, sort of. And it's like he's like a cross between a Kirkland brand Yusuke Urameshi and a Kirkland brand Ryuji from Toradora. Got kind of both of those in there. And again, they're both the Kirkland brand of those characters. This is not a phenomenal character by any stretch of the imagination, mostly because a lot of his characterization is stuff that's told to us rather than seeing him do things and then responding to those things and having that be his characterization, especially in the early episodes. But he's still fun to follow, much like a lot of this cast. This is just a very large cast of very fun and wacky delinquent characters that all sort of stick to this central code of, hey, we're here to protect this community, so that's the only thing you need to fall in line for. Otherwise, fuck it, do whatever you want, I guess. Which is a very fun idea for the delinquent genre. I'm not super well versed in this genre, so I don't know how often that comes up, but for me it is relatively new, so it was a fun little reversal on this, just to be like, oh, these are the good delinquents, though. These are the it's almost like sort of like an anarchist kind of concept, where it's like, we're not going to be bound by societal rules other than treat everyone right and protect each other. And so definitely dug that a lot. And just sort of the ways that different characters respond to that, Sakura especially, as he's this outsider coming into this community and seeing how well everything meshes together. It was very fun to watch. And also just the fights are really fucking good too. Well, asterisk. There is a lot of Sakuga put into these fights, and a lot of them are very well choreographed fights. A lot of them have their really big hype moments. There is a lot of tension in these fights. They are very well constructed fights, and they are very well polished and well animated. Everything is very crisp and clean looking. Asterisk. My two asterisks for the for the action scenes in this are, A, a lot of times it feels very disconnected from the background, and I don't mean just in like a compositing way. I mean in a way where it just, the way they move in relation to the environment, a lot of times it just looks like they are not on the same plane of existence. Again, not as a result of compositing, but as a result of just how things are moving. It just looks kind of off sometimes, which leads to asterisk number 2. Sometimes a lot of it feels very weightless and not quite as impacting as it could be. Not all the time. A lot of time the fights are... there is definitely some impact there, especially in Sakura's fight against the second in command of the whatever school that was, Shishi Tomon or whatever, during that big arc in the middle of the series. That had some really fucking good stuff in it, but there is definitely a weight problem and a disconnection problem. Like, there's like a stairwell chase in the final episode that I think really displays what I'm talking about, where Sakura is just jumping down some flights of stairs, and it just feels off. Although that one also has some compositing issues too. So yeah, this was overall a fun show. Definitely lost a lot of steam in the last few episodes, and I will say during the back end of that big arc that I mentioned, it gets super flashback heavy, and a lot of those flashbacks end up feeling very repetitive. So that definitely started to drag. There were a lot of moments in the last like 5-ish episodes, of this series, where I was just checking my phone because I was getting kind of bored. But overall, very fun, big fight, shonen battle, fighty, delinquent manga. If you want something that had... This feels like it would have been written 20 years ago, or 30 years ago even. But it looks very modern, and it's very polished looking. I like the character designs quite a bit, and the lighting's very solid, the color design's very solid. It's a good show. Looking forward to Season 2. Alright, Windbreaker is complete. And we're going to put you in the number 10 spot with a strong 7. Good show, great fights, very fun. Okay, so down to 33 randoms left. Let's see what we pull. It's going to be 25. A lot of stuff from the back end of this list. Tadaima Okaeri. I know this is like, I'm home, welcome back. That's what it means, but I've absolutely no clue what this show is about. So let's jump into it. Okay. So if my knowledge is correct, based on like other shows, this is the first official Omegaverse anime, as far as I know. If you don't know what that means, good for you. Don't go through the trouble of looking it up. It's not like awful, but it's just, it's not a subset of fanfiction that you need to go out of your way to learn about, but it does come from fanfiction. And it's... just go watch like a YouTube video about it or something. But what I find very shocking about this anime is that they like don't
explain it. Like, this show must have been marketed, exclusively marketed as an Omegaverse show, because I got 11 minutes into it, and if I did not know what Omegaverse was, I would have had no clue what the fuck anyone was talking about until around the 10-minute mark. I would have been so fucking confused. Because they just don't explain it. So, I guess if you don't know what Omegaverse is, you're gonna have a rough time with this show. Not that I'm recommending it. I only got 11 minutes in. It's kinda boring, which is probably the worst thing I could say about it, is that it's an Omegaverse show that's boring. Like, everything about it is super average, not particularly noteworthy, very C-grade everything. But one thing I did notice is that, like, it's also, I guess, the broader category of this above Omegaverse would be that this is a yaoi series. And, like, our main characters are a married couple, but whenever they kiss, the camera kind of, like, cuts around it, or, like, frames it so that you don't see them, like, a straight-on shot of them kissing. Which, is that homophobic? I think it kinda is. Like, if this was like a straight couple, they wouldn't bother doing that. So, is there some kind of censorship thing with where this aired? Is this just the director's idea? I'm so confused. And they're not like wild kisses or anything. It's just like a normal, like, hey, have a good day at work, smooch. Like, it's weird. I find it weird. But anyway, the show's boring, unfortunately. So we're moving on.
Okay, random Omegaverse show is coming off the list. Let's roll again, see what we get next. It's gonna be 14, which is Go-Go Loser Ranger. This was one of the more popular shows, one of the more hyped ones, airing this season. Heard it had a little bit of production issue, but let's try it out and let's see what it do.
Well, once again, that's another show that was like exactly what I thought it would be, and also nothing like what I thought it would be. Although, in this instance, I would say it's for the worse. I got through, what, like, episode and a half of Go-Go Loser Ranger. For one, I have a problem with the aesthetic of this show. It is very, like, the designs are good, but, like, the character designs are good, but, like, the actual aesthetic does not feel fully realized. There are compositing issues everywhere. The color design feels really wonky. There's just a lot of awkwardness to how this show looks, and it makes it kind of unpleasant to look at a good majority of the time. But aside from that, in the episode and a half that I watched, it's basically like all subversion but no substance. And don't get me wrong, I like the framework for this story that they've set up. It's like, okay, it's Super Sentai / Power Rangers, but the Super Sentai beat the evil organization a decade ago, and now they're just keeping the little what they're called dusters, like the little goons, around as like sporting event stuff, and they're keeping the public in the dark about having defeated them already, and it's just become like a weekly entertainment kind of thing. They set it up in a fucking stadium, and there's like a ton of merchandising. There's recruiting for the Ranger Corps. I like the concept. I like the real world things that it is critiquing and making fun of. But so far it's been like all allegory and all subversion and nothing else. There's a little bit of character. There's like the bare bones amount of characterization, but not enough to get me invested in anyone. Like, at the end of the first episode, I had the thought of like, okay, now what? And I just don't see this going in a direction that I would be particularly interested in. It's definitely given me some ideas for my own narratives that I would like to dwell on a little bit more if I were to ever to write some kind of military themed satire or political critique or something. But as it stands with Go-Go Loser Ranger, I'm just not hooked, and it's just not hooking me. That's plain and simple.
Alright, Loser Ranger coming off the list. Let's roll again and see what we get next. It's going to be 22. What is 22? Ah, yes, Train to the End of the World. It's time for some more Tsutomu Mizushima. I heard this one's wacky as shit. Let's go.
Bravo, Mizushima. You have done it again. Just binged all of Train to the End of the World in one day. I managed to do this all across a single Saturday. That's how much I like this show. Yep, fireworks still going off because it's July 6th. Oh well. Yes, this was... So, I got a couple episodes into this show, and I put this on Twitter. My initial reaction at first was like, well, Mizushima's done pretty much everything except break reality, so that's this show. If you didn't watch the previous episode of the seasonal wrap-up show where I talked about the latest Girls in Panzer movie, Mizushima is one of my favorite directors. He did, obviously, Girls in Panzer, but also Shirobako, Another, Squid Girl, Joshiraku, Mayoiga, Magnificent Kotobuki, and now Train to the End of the World, which it's a Mizushima anime, alright. It has all of his hallmarks. It has a very fun fascination with large vehicles. It has his trademark style of comedy where characters just keep talking and talking and talking and don't stop, and the punchline is just everything that they say. It has his really solid vehicular action directing, although I do wish there was a little more of the vehicle stuff in this one. I should say, I wish there was more vehicle action scenes in this one, because that's one of the things I really love about Mizushima between Girls in Panzer and Magnificent Kotobuki, is his vehicle-based action directing. And there are some cool, like, POV shots, like train POV shots in this one, but not quite as much as I was hoping for. This show was actually not at all what I was expecting. I was expecting a lot more like Densha otaku kind of stuff, especially considering how he was tweeting throughout this whole show. Like I was following him. I follow him on Twitter, and like he would just constantly talk about like different like train lines and train like stations and railroad facts about Japan and stuff while this was airing, and that's really not important to the show at all. What this show is just Mizushima throwing every single fucking idea he has at the wall. Does it matter if it sticks? Absolutely fucking not. Because it just keeps on trucking, the train keeps on riding them rails. But you know what? For the most part, it was all really fascinating. It's just, one of the core appeals of this show is just seeing what the fuck is he going to come up with next. Like, it starts off pretty mild with like, oh, all of the people are like turning into animals and stuff. And then it escalates like, oh, mushrooms are doing a fungus, like infecting the people of the town the next stop over. Which I didn't even realize until I just started talking about it, that plays very heavily, that the fungus that makes them not want to do anything and just stay stagnant is very much part of the theme of this show. The main driving like theme of this is like stagnation versus change, and the forces, the emotional forces in our heart that fight for or against those ideas. And it's what drives the main conflict between our lead character Shizuku and, or is that what it is? Shizuku? I'm terrible with names if you haven't been watching this show for a while. And the girl that they're trying to find, Yoka, who is partially the source of this massive reality fuckery in the first place. And before I get to that, I got sidetracked, but the reality bending shit, like it gradually, like they're just casually turning the dial up each and every episode, and I was like, okay, I can feel it. He's turning the dial up a little bit. When is he going to smack me in the fucking face? And that was episode 8, which was fucking bizarre and insane. This weird rewrite of a fucked up magical girl series with pig people and like this holy shit, and chess, like shogi, Japanese chess in it. That's another thing I love about Mizushima's shows, is they're so dense with ideas. He just crams everything in, and it's so fun to watch. And even like before they got to like the main town for that episode, they were like they hit us with the like, oh, this is the town. Like, they speed through one of the stops where it's like, oh, this is the town that makes you relive one of your worst moments in life. Awesome. Cool. And it was just immediately very dark all of a sudden. Not all of the flashbacks get explanations, but it's kind of like, oh, wow, okay. All right, that was rough. And it was immediately preceded by a town that just makes you like itchy all over, as like to catch you off guard. That's another, Mizushima is really good at catching you off guard with some of this stuff. And just the escalation into bonkers fucking nonsense is just so good. This is like, for a show that's pretty much about being on the rails literally the entire time, the show is fucking off the rails metaphorically the entire time. I'm sure this is not the last time I'm going to use a train pun in this video. But what stayed on the rails, I gotcha, was this, the slow sort of development / realization of Shizuku and her, how she relates to Yoka and the things that she said that were really not cool. Like, very mean thing to say, but they really wrap this up in a very dense cloud of, like, Shizuku doesn't want Yoka to leave because she recognizes that Yoka is so much better than her, and she doesn't want her to go far away, and she just wants everything to stay. She wants everyone to stay in town, and just everything to be stagnant, and just things, she wants to be comfortable the way things are. But that's not how life works, and that's one of the things that she learns as this series goes on. That's kind of what everyone learns as this show goes on, is like, stuff is just going to change, often with a violent display of fireworks. Man, okay, come on, it's July 6th, guys. Alright, anyway, what I'm saying is I really enjoyed I was surprised by how much I enjoyed the characterization in this show, and how very well tied into the main themes of the show it was, and just the general atmosphere of it all was really damn good. And you know what? It looked pretty good too. It's not amazing looking. This is by EMT Squared, actually, which this is I went to check my mail just to be sure. This is the second of 17 EMT Squared shows that I have tried and actually finished. I can't name any other ones off the top of my head, except I guess the last one I watched was Fluffy Paradise from last season, which really did not look good at all, which just goes to show that the studio really don't matter if you got a great director in the director's seat, and Mizushima is a great fucking director. Although I think the last episode got delayed a week because I was looking through the Crunchyroll listings, and there was an 11.5 episode that was a recap, so he just stumbled right at the finish line, but you know what? It still looked really good at the end. Anytime they did action scenes, it was really good. The color design fit really well with whatever scenes it was trying to, whatever emotions it was trying to evoke for each scene. And you know what? It's just generally really well shot. There were, like, I just realized now I don't think there was really any shot in this show where I was like, oh, that looked kind of weird. Aside from the shots where I guess Mizushima is intentionally making it weird. Like, there were no shots where I was like, oh, they could have composited that better, or they could have framed it better. There really weren't anything like that, which is another thing that I trust Mizushima to do. Sorry, I love Mizushima as a director, and his sticky fingerprints are all over this show if you know what to look for. And much like a lot of other Mizushima stuff, it was just really damn funny. It was fun. Really, my only notable complaint overall is sometimes the voice acting felt a little weak. So that was a little disappointing, but also I didn't really recognize a lot of the voice cast off the top of my head, except for Chika Anzai, who is Shizuku, which is definitely not her typical realm of stuff. If I recall correctly, Chika Anzai is Reina in Sound Euphonium, and she typically plays that kind of character. So this is a bit of a departure from that, but she plays that really well. Just this stubborn hard-headedness but also this sort of very sort of confused side as well. This very emotional teenager side to her. But yeah, some of the other voice acting could have definitely had a little bit more juice to it. Also, some of the sound effects could have been a little punchier. And this isn't really a complaint per se, but more so just what I expect from a Mizushima anime. Although with this one, I actually looked at it beforehand, and he doesn't have his usual sound director. Again, go back and watch my thoughts on the Girls in Panzer film for more in-depth about this. But like, apparently Mizushima did the sound directing himself for this. Maybe he just couldn't get his typical sound director, or maybe he just wanted a slightly different sound for this. But you know what? The train sound effects were all really good. Actually, now that I think about it, it's not that I dislike any of the sound effects or anything. It's just it had a very different vibe that I wasn't expecting. And when I eventually rewatched this as part of me making a very dense, in-depth video about Mizushima's directing style, I'll probably appreciate it more. But yeah, if you like wacky fucking anime that's also just really competent to watch and look at, Train to the End of the World is a damn good time.
Alright, Train to the End of the World is complete. We're going to scroll fairly high up on the list here. Yeah, I'm going to put it in the number 6 spot for now with a light 8. Mizushima, you have done it again. Okay, so how many more randoms do I have left? Let's do one more. We'll do one more for this video. So let's see what we roll next. It is 18. A salad bowl of eccentrics. No clue whatsoever what this is about. I've heard some people mention it on my timeline, so hopefully it's good.
Yeah, don't particularly feel one way or the other about that one. Just totally fine, completely average across the board. This one's a reverse isekai, I guess. People from a fantasy world come into our world, and it's just very bare bones and like not. There's no like meat to it. There's no je ne sais quoi. There's nothing in it that makes me go like, okay, I've seen this premise several times before. Why should I watch this one in particular? And again, there's nothing like particularly bad about it aside from the fact that it doesn't really have that like motivating factor to it. The characters are fun. The animation's pretty average. It's not bad, but it's average. Although it was very weird that they were just like, the cinematography is just like, and now we're gonna do the fan service and just have like split screen shots of this girl bathing, and it was just very jarring. One thing I did notice plot wise that didn't really make any sense was like this princess from another world threatens this guy in order to stay with him by suggesting that if she leaves, people will experiment on her, like that's typical like sci-fi trope. But how would she know that, since she comes from a fantasy world? Just a weird oversight there. Yeah, I really don't feel anything about this show one way or the other. That's a shame.
Okay, salad bowl off the list. And we're going to jump to our end caps now. It's time for comfy stuff with Laid Back Camp Season 3. Now, this one has gone through significant changes since the, as opposed in contrast to the first two seasons in terms of the character designs and stuff. So hopefully it's not too jarring. Let's do some camping.
Yep, that was pretty much, for the most part, just more of the same with a few caveats and such. Not surprised at all. Just binged all of Yuru Camp Season 3, Laid Back Camp, whatever you want to call it. It was fun. Really not a whole lot to talk about on the story front, because it's just more of the same. Although I will say that this season on the whole seems a little bit, just a smidge, wackier and more comedy-centric than previous seasons have been. Just by a hair. And I'm not opposed to that. They were good jokes. It was fun times. Also, we got more Ayano this season, the like maroon-haired girl, who I completely forgot was voiced by Tomoyo Kurosawa, who you probably know better as Kumiko from Sound Euphonium. That's the second time I've mentioned a Sound Euphonium actress in this video. It's wild. So it was, and as usual, she was phenomenal. She's probably one of, if not the best voice actress in the industry right now. And it was nice to get like a little lighthearted comedic warm-up of her before I get to UFO Season 3 in a few weeks. But the big thing with Season 3 of Yuru Camp was the design changes. Now, the first two seasons, and I believe the movie as well, were done by C Station, the studio. And for Season 3, it got moved over to 8-bit. Which, in theory, makes sense, because 8-bit also makes Yamano Susume. I don't know if there's any staff crossover. I'm pretty sure the director is the same for all seasons of Yuru Camp. I don't know that for sure. I didn't really bother checking, but I would be surprised if the director was different. But the big change overall is the character designs. These are notably different character designs than the first couple seasons, and that caused a bit of a stir in the lead up to it. And on the whole, I would say it's a bit of a mixed bag. Overall, I think I like them slightly less than the new designs. I like them slightly less than the previous season. I don't think they're outright bad, but there are a lot of situations where they look significantly worse. Mostly in like neutral expressions. Like if it's just like a character just standing there smiling or something, it looks kind of weird. But if the character is emoting, or they're, and not just like emoting in like the chibi, like eyes completely changed design kind of ways. Like if they're like emoting something genuine with that design, it tends to look a lot better. But the static expressions tend to look a little wonky. And to me, it seemed most noticeable with characters that have glasses. So like Aki and Nadeshiko's older sister. That's where it seemed to stand out the most to me, just because it's the eye designs. They are very different than previous seasons. The irises are a lot more of a narrow ellipse or oval shape, and the actual eye shape is a bit more triangular than it used to be, if I recall. and so sometimes it looks a little weird. Again, it's not like a massive downgrade, but I do think it is a downgrade. Would have much preferred the previous season designs, but I don't outright dislike these designs. I'll give it credit. Also, some other things I noticed. A lot of people I talked to were complaining about the backgrounds for this season. I've always thought that not necessarily the backgrounds themselves, but the compositing for Eurocamp, I always thought was not great. And it is slightly worse here, but in the way that it is slightly worse for the entire industry, in my opinion. So it is not notably worse, in my opinion, but there is definitely a stark contrast between the characters and the backgrounds. They stand out quite a bit, and there were a few shots, like what was it? The scene, I forget what episode it is, but it's like Nadeshiko and her sister were taking a picture of like the thing on the mountainside, and then it shows the mountain, and then it like flips the perspective to them, and it's a wide shot of just them middle frame, and it looked pretty bad, just really terrible compositing. And also, like, that's the one thing where I would say there is a notable, not notable, but there is a noticeable downgrade in terms of shot composition, in that there are a few shots here and there that just look kind of not good. And also, like, I kept noticing this, like, every 2 episodes or so, there would be a shot where it just, like, zooms in for, like, a second or for, like, 2 seconds. And I can't understand why. Like, it just zooms in for some reason. Like, the camera just zooms in. The camera. And I can't figure out, like, why did they do that? Other than to make the camera move and to make it not a static shot. But it doesn't look... It looks weird. I don't know why. It looks weird in a way that, like, it wasn't supposed to be, or it wasn't ideal for it to be there. I don't quite... These are one of these things where it's like you just gotta feel it, and you gotta, like, see it to understand what I'm talking about. Also, I will say the CG moped stuff is also a bit worse. Mostly in that previous seasons, you would just see the moped from a distance, and it would just be Rin driving it. This season, for some reason, started to A, show it much more close up, and B, started to show, like, the CG character model moving around on the moped. So it made it, like, even more obvious that it made it stick out even more. So, yeah, really that's all I kind of have to say about Eurocamp. It's still definitely Eurocamp. Like, this is one of those shows where it's like, the aesthetic is the primary reason why you're watching this show. Like, you watch it for the vibes. And the vibes are still there. Like, the backgrounds themselves are still really solid, and this season in particular gets a bit of a cheat code boost by having it be during Sakura season, like the cherry blossoms, which you kind of have to work to not make good in anime, but these in particular, like, were really solid. In particular because they decided to... They paired them with the usual Eurocamp aesthetic, which has a bit more earthy tone to it. than you normally get with like the traditional anime sakura blossom aesthetic. Normally it's much more vibrant and like high or very colorful, with like greens and blues and yellows and stuff. This one, it has more of like those brownish kind of tones to it because of the area that it's around, and it made it look a lot more unique. So that was definitely a nice treat. And again, the camping stuff is still good. So it's more yurt camp, just a little bit disappointing in comparison to previous seasons because of the artistic shift. I'll still watch more if they make more, but it is what it is.
Alright, Laid Back Camp Season 3 is complete. And we're going to put it, where did I decide? I'm going to put it in the number 13 spot right here with a decent 7. Still good. It's still a good show. Just could have been a little bit better.